The legendary ancient kingdoms of the Levant, like Israel, Moab, and the wealthy Phoenician city-states, began as a collection of fractured, heavily oppressed tribal groups. In the late Bronze Age, Canaan was a narrow proxy battleground, squeezed between Egypt and the Hittite Empire. These superpowers aggressively controlled key Mediterranean trade routes, extracting local wealth through heavy taxation and conscripting Canaanite men for foreign wars. This clay tablet, from the Amarna letters, is diplomatic correspondence between Canaanite mayors and the Egyptian pharaoh. Written in foreign Akkadian cuneiform, the translations reveal total subjection. Mayors desperately beg for military aid, while one calls himself a dog falling at the pharaoh's feet. These local leaders were essentially middle managers for a foreign power. Long before they could form their own sovereign states, the Canaanite people were politically fragmented and utterly dependent on foreign empires for survival. Around 1200 BC, the international system of the Eastern Mediterranean failed in a cataclysmic breakdown known as the Late Bronze Age collapse. A combination of widespread drought and severe economic instability crippled the established powers, a crisis soon compounded by waves of violent maritime invaders, collectively known as the Sea Peoples. This collapse changed the map almost overnight. The mighty Hittite Empire dissolved entirely, while a weakened Egypt permanently retreated south to the Nile Valley. For the Canaanite tribes in the middle, the disappearance of their imperial overlords created a massive power vacuum. While historians often frame the end of the Bronze Age as a localized apocalypse, for the Canaanites, the destruction of the Old World Order was the exact geopolitical catalyst they needed to break free. Moving into the early Iron Age, these historically oppressed tribal groups took advantage of the empty land stake to consolidate into the localized kingdoms of Israel, Judah, Ammon, Moab, Edom, and the Phoenician city-states. Drawing borders on a map wasn't enough to build legitimate nations. To consolidate power, these new rulers had to deliberately discard the administrative tools and cultural symbols of the foreign empires that had once controlled them. The first major shift occurred in their writing. Instead of utilizing the complex Akkadian cuneiform of their former masters, these kingdoms developed streamlined alphabetic systems, allowing them to conduct state business in their own native dialects. They also restructured their religious lives. They rejected the authority of the Egyptian pharaoh's sun god and rallied their populations around distinct local patron deities, like Yahweh in Israel, Chemosh in Moab, or Milcom in Ammon. By standardizing local written languages and swearing exclusive allegiance to national gods, these former vassals successfully forged the foundational pillars of sovereign identity. Fast forward to about 830 BC to find the Mesha stele, a primary record of this cultural shift. This imposing stone slab represents the end of the era characterized by the small clay tablets of the Amarna period. The inscription, written in the newly developed Moabite alphabet, records the voice of King Mesha of Moab, proudly proclaiming his independence and military dominance. He boasts that his patron god has delivered me from all kings and made me look down on all my enemies. Mesha attributes his political and military victories entirely to the guidance of his national god, Chemosh. This highlights how effectively these localized state religions unified and emboldened the new kingdoms. The collapse of the Bronze Age empires bought the Canaanite peoples a 400-year window of autonomy. During this time, they thrived, generating massive wealth through maritime trade and expanding their cities with monumental architecture and fortifications. Eventually, new empires, like the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and the Persians, would rise in the east and conquer the Levant again. But by the time these new armies arrived, the local populations were too entrenched in their own cultures to be erased. The birth of a nation is sometimes the byproduct of surviving a broader collapse. The alphabets, distinct ethnic identities, and national religions forged in that window of independence survived antiquity, ultimately laying the cultural foundations that are still visible in the Levant today.